But at Cardiff we've got a baling plant, we've got a fleet of vehicles, so we're doing full collections, and we are just about, I can't say anything yet, but we're expecting to be able to open our Has Waste transfer station at Cardiff as well. So there's quite a lot that we're expanding. We couldn't grow the business that much. My background was originally in waste management, working for UK Waste.
Yeah.
So started off as a rep with the UK and then became sales manager for the South Wales area, so running a team of salespeople there. 1997, if you were around, cast mind you back, there was the point that UK Waste were being reversed into Biffa.
Yeah.
And I was at a certain age then and decided that I always fancied going alone. So I became an independent agent for a couple of compactor and baler manufacturers, basically selling waste handling systems, and continued to do that. And that worked well, and we started to rent machines out, which gave us a bit more longevity, you know, a bit more reliable contractual business coming in, rather than, you know, every year. And then we had a client then who said, well, I want to talk to you about cardboard recycling. And as I walked around their site, a big automotive parts manufacturer, I said, look, you know, you're doing so many things here which could be done better. I'd always said to myself that I wouldn't get involved in broking, as a lot of people were tending to move to in those days. But I said to these guys, look, I can write you a proposal. It was on the fly, and I did that, went back to them, presented it, and they said, well, could you start on Tuesday? So at that point then, that's how Forward Waste Management started as a brokerage business. And then as time went by, we were using third-party independent contractors, and they started to sort of say to us, well, we can't keep up with the volume of business that you're asking us to do. So we put our first 3 trucks on the road, and then we had a supplier that we were working with for cardboard baling. They closed their plant in South Wales, so needed to then open our own baling plant, and everything is just built up organically there. So we've become a £10 million business at the moment, and were it not for COVID, we would have continued over the last 2 years with a 25% growth rate. So our next phase now is to go from 10 to 20 over the next 3 to 4 years, really keep on pushing that way. Because of the work that we do in the waste industry and the customers that we serve, compactors and balers tend to be at the core of every proposal to actually reduce, when we say our struct lines reducing waste in every way, is to actually reduce the volume and therefore the number of lifts that they require, so that we can show them that there's a better way of doing things. And so, because Envirocrit was where the thing started, as the business of Forward has grown, it's been a kind of tag and drag. So we build all of our own containers, and this year coming here, for instance, we thought, well, we'll see what happens if we put some containers out, and everybody's saying, we love your containers, and can you quote us? So all of a sudden I'm having to go back to my engineering manager now and say to him, well, what if we needed not only the 100 containers we need to build ourselves, but what if I wanted to build another 200 hook of containers? How are we going to manage that?
That's a nice problem to have, isn't it?
It is a nice problem to have within the white water of the post-COVID, post-Brexit situation.
Try and find some steel.
And staff, and lorry drivers, and all of the other stuff as well. So you know it. So that's basically where we're about.
Tell us a little bit more about this eco-compactor, because we're really interested in the solar-powered aspect. I'm there's 2 things. One, the technology, and you know, it's solar, it's sun, it converts into energy. You're driving for bringing that to market. What's the driver for that?
Again, customer need combined with a kind of essence of what if. We do like to develop new ideas, but very often because there's a specific customer demand or an application that we're trying to satisfy. So one of the first things we thought about with this is a retail chain that we're dealing with at the moment. Some of their sites, it's not possible to actually lay a mains power supply out to where the compactors typically would be on site. So we said, well, okay, how can we overcome that? The best way of doing it is to have hopefully a solar powered machine. It ain't going to happen on wind, but solar power could work. And so we looked at the technology within PV cells
Yeah.
to see if we could use the power of the sun to then actually harness that in batteries which are held within the machine as
Yeah.
well, and then to see whether or not we could actually get enough pressure going through the system so that it would still compact and give the typical 6 to 8 ton load that you'd
Yeah.
be expecting to get with a static compactor and a container connected to it. And so what we've done is to work with our hydraulics supplier that I've been working with for the last 20-25 years, and to look at the way that we could actually design the power pack for the machine so that it could do two things. One, to actually give the right kind of punch to actually compact properly, but secondly, to have an ability to actually then maximize the amount of electrical power that we could draw from the sun directly, and then also to bank as well.
Yeah.
So the benefit being is that it's a lovely sunny day today. Now we're maxing out in terms of the amount of current that the machine can actually draw. It's absolutely maxed out. Even if it was a cloudy day, even if it was raining, there's enough lux coming from the sky in order to actually still power the machine.
Brilliant.
However, when it's dark, winter months, whatever else, the machine has got the battery power to then still continue operating.
Storage
from
is the issue with this sort of technology anyhow.
Yes.
And the time when the machine's not working is when it can maximise days like this. So I completely get that.
Yeah, yeah.
Would it be something that an organisation would be looking to buy one of, lease, or would they put 2 or 3 in place?
We're able to provide either a straight sale, or we can arrange leasing arrangements with partners, but we also have a very large rental fleet, so we do an all-inclusive rental as well. So all service, parts, labour, maintenance, all of those bits and pieces. So there's always a way that we can achieve this. One of the other drivers though for this is secondly, there's a big push towards the environment, of course, and it's trying to do something which is actually giving back maybe. We see that there's a big opportunity within the festival and events market.
Of course.
So if you look at obviously the waste management for anything from Glastonbury to various other pop concerts to other events around,
with the debris on at the
you
end
see
of
it there. Now typically with those events you'll get a local waste contractor putting out a whole load of wheelie bins on site and then whizzing around there with a trade waste vehicle.
Yeah.
The difficulty with that though is that you need to make sure that you're able to do those collection rounds so that the wheelie bins aren't spilling out and that there's still capacity for the public to actually put their stuff away. And also there's sometimes a health and safety concern about getting a moving vehicle around.
Yeah.
So the benefit that we're doing with this now, our next prototype will be to put the same system into a 32-yard portable waste compactor, so that we can literally just send it to the site, pop it down on a hook lift, and then just leave it there, so that instead of having 150 wheelie bins being lifted, you'd have 1 6-ton load of waste being taken away via the compactor. And for instance with Glastonbury, you could put one of these in the corner of every field, and then it's that, if you give the public the tools to actually deal with their waste, they'll try to do something with it.
Yeah.
You know, but if the bin's full, if a wheelie bin's full, you can't do a thing with it.
No,
so that's why we thought, well, let's chance our arm with that. Let's see the way it goes. That one's going to go into a garden centre where it will sit very happily in the back of the yard there, where we can't get power supply to it, and they can just fill that up and it will do a job. Solar power isn't suitable for compactors which are in a process situation in a factory, because quite simply it can't cycle fast enough, but we've got other machines within our range that can actually deal with that.
That's fantastic. And I should imagine that obviously, I mean, you've responded to the market and it said, look, we need this. There is this particular problem. Throughout everything you're doing, even you're moving into the large skip, row skip aspect. Are you innovating? Are you doing stuff differently? And is this what's drawing people to what you're doing?
Again, the hook lift container you can see there, the Supermax hook lift container, is down to a story of satisfying a need for one of our clients from the waste management side of our company. So we deal with a large food manufacturer. They're producing a food waste material which we're sending to AD. That is having to travel maybe 100 miles in order to go to the AD site that we send it to. And if we were running out in standard hook load containers, either with a single container or with a drawbar arrangement that we do, we can carry and we can pull maybe a train weight of around about 14 ton tops. So the first thing was, well, how do we actually maximize the load weight? So this year, as well as our rigid hook loaders, we've put on the road hook lift trailers as well, Arctics, so we can now actually with that container get a maximum 24-25 ton load in there, pull it out that way. So that's why we developed and built that container for our own purposes.
Right.
On top of that container then is the solar powered sheeting system that we've incorporated, and again the reason why we went down the solar power route with that is that otherwise it would have to be connected to a power supply at the customer's site.
Right.
That could be an intermittent issue. The customer would have concerns from a health and safety point of view of having a trailing cable, for instance, going into that. We've tried to make it as easy as possible. So all that the operators at the site need to do in order to actually pull the sheet back is simply just to press the simple up and down button. So we're trying to make it as fail-safe and as easy as possible.
That's brilliant.
So that you can then keep the material dry, so you've not got birds, seagulls, rats and whatever else. The other big issue is that nobody really comes to Wales for a suntan. No. It rains a lot, and if you leave a container open, what you get is food waste then. With a whole load of water going in there, it reduces the calorific value of the food going into AD, so that has an issue. Secondly, then you start creating things like an unsafe load. So it's in our interest to have that container covered over.
Is that something you can retrofit to other containers?
Absolutely.
Is that another product?
Absolutely, very, very easily. And we can take, for instance, an existing container, we can refurbish the container, shot blast, respray it, and then also put in the sheeting system as well.
That is pretty impressive.
And that's the way that a lot of people are looking at with containers now, because there's so much pent-up demand in the system. Again, a lot of the container manufacturers out there are on 12-13 week delivery at the moment. All of a sudden the market's starting to hot up. So this show this year has been great for us. We thought we'd come and see what happened with the container market. And we've been really thrilled with the way the response we're getting there.
At the moment,
definitely.
Either looking to procure, but the whole refurbishment aspect, that's cool. And adding that to containers solves so many issues, doesn't it? Wow.
And I'd say the containers that we manufacture so far have been really for our own use. So we build our own compactors to go out to customers. We build our own containers. We might build maybe, last year I think we built about 150 containers just to actually go out within our own contracts. But we're thinking, well, if we can do that and if we can scale that side of the business up, we're investing in a new shot blast bay at the workshops now, with a full air extraction system with it as well. And if we can get some volume out of some contacts that we're able to pick up here, then of course it makes the whole economic viability of actually making that investment that much better. So we're really excited about that.
Fantastic. I think we've got 14 minutes of fantastic footage. I can speak to you all day. It's great. You're at RWM next week.
We're going to nip up. I'm going to the gala dinner. Really, really pleased to do that. I'm lucky enough to sit on the board of the CIWM. Have done for a number of years now. So again, the change that we're seeing now with the recent acquisition of the Let's Recycle team by Raw B2B, again is another big change there. I've followed the RWM from the days when it was down at Torbay, and then up to the NEC, and it's going to be interesting to see what happens next year with the combination of these two shows, which is what I think is going to be happening now. It would be nice to see if we could start putting up something in the UK every year, every couple of years, that could match, for instance, what's happening with EFAT in Munich. Again, it's a really great show, and I think that because we're coming out of COVID, I think what you said, David, everybody is wanting to actually connect again. I've seen people that I've known and I've dealt with in the waste industry for the last 30 years, but it's just so lovely to actually be able to bump a fist with people and actually get back together and talk about stuff. Teams meetings have got their own place, but there's a limit.
In terms of changes and...
It's so exciting given the fact that the last 4 or 5 years, I've seen more churn and development in our industry than I'd seen probably in the 20 years before that. 25 years ago, landfill was still king. These days, landfill is almost irrelevant, and certainly doesn't really appear within the waste hierarchy anymore. Energy from waste really is actually the bottom of the rung.
Yeah.
And the really exciting thing that works really well for us is to actually minimise the effects of waste, not just from the point where it's collected from the collection point, whether it be a CA site or whether it be the yard of a manufacturing business or whether it be a hotel, but actually the time that people take to actually understand the effects of waste actually from the point of production right the way through. And it's the buying patterns now that people are actually making commercial choices, not just on cost, but actually it's the impact of, what does that actually mean. So we're speaking to customers far more about corporate social responsibility.
Yeah.
And we tend to gauge the intent of a prospective customer based on what we can define as what they're setting out there, where they want to be with it.
Yeah.
And that's what's really making the difference. The attitude of the general public has changed. Everybody cares about it now, and there's a commercial opportunity to be made out of doing things differently and doing things better than before, and challenging. Just don't take the status quo anymore. How could it be done differently? And that's exciting.
And I think everyone's aware of the whole climate side of things. Do you think it's going to get cheaper for business to be greener?
That's difficult to assess, because in some areas it will become more expensive, and in fact it should be. And in the same way that we did with the packaging waste regulations, the best way to actually steer behaviour and thought very often within commerce can be actually by putting a financial element, an incentive to it. The waste industry itself is kind of self-governing, self-regulating from that point of view. And it's economics that will actually come to the fore with that. We're seeing a lot of change in the market, whether it be cardboard, paper grade prices at the moment, steel prices, plastic polymer rates. We're seeing obviously a glut of timber coming into the market as well. And in the waste industry, we're all having to actually deal with that at its own time. But if we have a direction from government saying, business, this is the way that you need to be operating, you need to reduce the impact that you have on the economy. Carbon obviously is the big thing that people are talking about. It has to be from renewables. So again, if we've got a solar powered machine, we're kind of hitting that already. And the lovely thing is that the solar power machine that we're doing is just an example of what can be done. Anything that needs electricity to draw it from, can be that way. Why don't we see more investment in solar on all of the flat roof buildings that we've got? Somebody said to me yesterday, and it was a bona fide question, well, I'm running a shopping centre, so what do I do about having a solar powered machine in my underground waste management area? Well, of course, that ain't going to work. But what we can do just as easily, if they've got a roof, we can externalise that, run a cable, so it's all possible. It's just lateral thinking to actually do that way. The most important thing with that machine is the fact that we're able to take the power of the sun and to actually operate a hydraulic system, changing the way that those hydraulics work to actually enable it to actually still work competently and effectively, but just using the power of the sun for it.
Yeah, there's lots that can be done there.
But we'll be doing the same thing now. We'll be doing the same thing with a range of balers that we'll produce as well. So anything that we do, which is waste handling wise, we'll look to actually provide a solar element. It is, and you have to look at every opportunity from the point of view of cost benefit analysis. So with the work that we do in the manufacturing sector with our waste management business, is that we start a survey looking at where waste is produced on the shop floor and actually just trying to apply practical solutions that we may have learnt in other industries. So very often, for instance, if I'm dealing with a company that's involved in pressing or punching steel, I'm looking at the amount of skeletal scrap that they're therefore putting into their containers and saying, well look, you've got 6 inches of steel which is punched out of these size sheets you've got there. Why don't you speak to your steel supplier and see if you could actually make a more bespoke sheet steel size so you produce less skeletal scrap there. We also look at, for instance, the amount of time that it's taking the operator on a production line to move waste from the point of production into a container and then out to the yard where the waste is going to go. So for a reason that we're putting things like air extraction systems in there and bin lifting systems in there to try and reduce not only the cost but also the risk very often handling time as well. And we'll show that on a spreadsheet arrangement, so that ultimately the person who's making the decision, whether it be the MD or the FD, over the time it takes to actually led by the numbers, and to be able to prove it, because we've done enough of these applications that we can put them in a car, say come and see one of our other customers, see it for yourself, feel it, touch it, and let that actually do the selling. And then we're always learning at the same time. So what's worked well in the food industry can very often work well in the electronics industry as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's been a pleasure speaking to you today.
David, and you.
Really
thanks for your time.
I could talk to you all day. Really, it geeks me out. All of this aspect. No, it's from the tech to the waste aspect, everything, and you're amazing on here. So
well, this is the problem that we've got with the waste industry, and I've found it that when people get into it, you just can't leave it alone. You know, and the opportunity, there's so much diversity. I mean, you just have to look around the show. You look at the diversity of what we've got here, and it's growing all